March, April next year. And then we will consult on the draft strategy and develop business cases. And we'll be kind of doing that a bit in parallel from May to October next year, depending on the final long-term plan timelines. But that's around about the time that business cases are being developed. The next slide, please. So we do have some recent changes, obviously, to national direction, particularly the NPSIB. That was just limited to quite a targeted amendment to make quarrying and mining more enabling and consistent with other national directions, so not much change there. The next phase of RM reform will be about streamlining the planning system with one plan per region and an emphasis on spatial planning, as you are all aware. So there will be an opportunity there to really link in with that, to identify areas that are no-go for development and planning for connections and corridors between biodiversity areas. So we will try and synergise those two initiatives or two projects, if you like. But suffice to say that we're just noting those developments with interest and ensuring that our work's aligned to to the national direction. So 2 new slides here. So the next slide, please, Jordan. So this is an attempt to show how the regional biodiversity strategy is a thread that joins the biodiversity objectives and policies and various other strategies and policies and plans together so that they align with each other. So the NPSIB stipulates that local authorities must have regard to the relevant regional biodiversity strategy when developing restoration objectives in their plans and policies. So it does have quite an RMA kind of directive, if you like. Obviously, this might look a bit different in the future given the RM reform, combining plans into one regulatory plan for each region. Next slide, please. Just to note that we do have a number of projects or initiatives that have got strong synergies with the regional biodiversity strategy that are going on at the moment. And this is just a selection of those projects. And as we develop the strategy, we will look to these projects to inform the content and also identifying opportunities to coordinate our engagement with the stakeholders and use the results from that engagement to shape the strategy as well. So I'm going to hand over to Angus now for the next few slides.
Thank you, Judy. Just in terms of that, if you just flick through there. Yep, thank you. So the engagement goals and set out in our engagement strategy are about activating the biodiversity accord partners that we've already talked to participate and contribute, recognising that they're a voice within their local communities, and that's the real value of this is activating it at a local level. And just reminding that this is not the regional council strategy. This is a regional strategy, and we want all partners involved in that. We want to take a spatial approach to that, looking at maps, looking at layers around key ecosystems and environments, and engaging people with that content, and really getting them thinking about projects and where we might go next in terms of activating biodiversity. Cultivating that community buy-in and getting that collective responsibility is going to be part of the engagement approach around. So it's not just the regional council's job. Go to the next one, please. So just some engagement considerations, and you'll all be aware of this, is just that engagement fatigue. So ensuring that we're joined up with other projects and initiatives, some of the things that Judy's touched on that are already going on within this council and within other organisations as well. So utilising existing forums and leveraging that as much as possible. Being transparent that we're not necessarily going to get everyone on the same page with this mahi, and that's okay. Other regions have done this process and been through it. I'm sure Councillor Clarkson's mentioned that to you a few times in Taranaki, and it's really about starting and then building that momentum over time. So getting those willing partners on board, and certainly in terms of the core partners, that's the key target. Linking those backyard interests. So what are you interested in locally with that wider landscape renewal? So making sure that joined up wider network thinking is linked to what people might be doing locally. And one of the other things is looking at reducing those barriers to participation and entry. And so actually exploring that with people and saying, what might be stopping you, what things could incentivize you around action in this space. Go into the next one, please. The engagement is planned over 3 stages. I've got a slide on each of these stages, but I'll just run through it in this slide if that's okay. So we've got the targeted workshop series. We're hoping to host those in person, and again, leveraging those forums and established hui that we do have with the Accord partners and iwi. And then a wider engagement, which would be more online orientated. Those that are familiar with the regional coastal plan, we had quite a bit of success through a tool called Engagement HQ around that, with surveys and mapping and people able to drop pins on maps and comments. So we're looking at that type of approach in terms of engaging the wider community. We also see industry stakeholders and farming community as part of that as well. Once we get some feedback on the strategy and the themes that are running through that, then there would be that wider consultation, which would happen as part of the long-term plan. So we see that as a submissions type process that would ensure that the strategies are formalised across the region. You just flick through the next 3 slides, maybe. Yep, thank you. Next one. I know you guys want to talk. So the themes, and obviously these are draft only, and really keen to get your feedback on these today, and also on the engagement approach. So really keen on hearing thoughts around that. The first one is about protecting what matters, and so that's recognising there's a lot of mahi already going on in this space, a lot of projects, a lot of good things happening, and about safeguarding those native species, habitats, and ecosystem integrity. So looking after that stuff that we do have. The second one is about enabling people, supporting communities and landowners of kaitiaki for biodiversity restoration. The third one is about improving that sort of reporting so that it can make sense to people, what's happening with long-term trends, how are we doing, and making sure that that progress is being measured. There's a lot of information out there, but it's about pulling that together, regional view. Working together, so partnering with tangata whenua in terms of treaty obligations and other obligations around that, and making sure that we're working in partnership in this space, and then sustaining the effort. So making sure that there's sustainable funding in this area, that there's long-term investment, and that resources and capacity and capability can be built. But those are the themes that we're thinking about exploring with people, and again, really keen to have your feedback on those. I think I've got some more detail on those. Would you like me to go through that, or?
Yeah, if you just quickly, Angus, here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one is about maintaining those ecological bottom lines and ecosystem functions. So there's a Resource Management Act function around that, which would be about maintaining biodiversity within the region, and that's incumbent on regional council as well as local authorities. And that protection can be achieved through regulatory and non-regulatory tools. Really, we're just trying to trigger thoughts and feedback into these areas. So that's what these are about. So if you go to the next one, please. You want to just, these are the types of graphics that we can use to illustrate that theme, what's happened over time with native habitats and habitat loss. And again, that goes to that spatial approach that I talked about before. I won't take you through those stats, but they're fairly depressing.
Just a question there, 75% of peatlands are lost, meaning they're turned into farms? Or...
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and we need to think about that and how we actually language that as well. Yeah.
Sorry, and connect up with the languaging from Stratton policy to make sure there's one consistent message that's going out.
Yeah.
Because you're meaning peatland ecosystems.
Correct.
With their species. Yeah.
Yeah, and the project team's been reflecting on that as well, is just probably staying away from that kind of crisis type language, so we actually can flip this into the positive and get people moving forward that way. So yeah.
Chris,
just a point. Is there a negative on that forest and scrub fragmented into thousands of patches, most smaller than 25 hectares? Because I've got friends who've got farms and they've got sidings which they've planted. None of them are 25 hectares, but it's stabilising the ground. It's got native trees on it now. I would have thought there was a positive.
Other benefits of that, yeah, I agree. Judy, do you want to
why is that highlighted? Less than 25 hectares. I can't see the problem.
It's really just to illustrate the loss in the indigenous vegetation, as you can see on that graphic. So the negative is around how much we've lost, but I totally agree that
Positive, we're getting it
that
back.
we've actually got some left on farms that are
Farmers are bringing some of that back too.
yes.
So yes,
Yeah,
it might
well
have been
aware.
lost initially, but it's actually being recreated. So
Point is it's fragmented.
It's fragmented.
That's what you're
Yeah.
trying to say.
And that
It's
when
not
they
a large ecosystem.
I don't think we need to get into that argument again. It's like the previous meeting we just had, where it's relative to what's in the diagrams is what's being expressed in that loss and that fragmentation. So, yep. Sorry.
Yeah,
Bruce. Yeah, Bruce online.
Yeah, if I just wanted to add to that fragmentation comment, because it's not just about the fragmentation of the system, it's about the ongoing loss that occurs even sometimes decades or hundreds of years after the fragmentation. And Chris is right. Large number of farmers are doing the right thing. And the point is here to frame it in the positive, to indicate what are the things you can do that prevent that ongoing loss that has been set in place because of the process of fragmentation by doing things like building riparian corridors, buffering the existing fragments, joining them up, making them more connected. Because if you don't do that, you just have a fragment sitting on a farm which continues to lose species. A good example of that, we can look in Hamilton City. If you look at Claudelands Bush, go and have a look at Claudelands Bush. So the total number of species in that system is still declining, even though there's a high level of protection because of that ongoing effects of fragmentation and the inability in the urban system to build the sort of corridors that you can build in a rural setting. I just wanted to make that point because, you've got to be very careful about the way you interpret a visual like the one that's in front of us.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Ben.
Yeah, similar point. It's like pre-human. Is that 800 AD? Is it 12th century? What date have you picked for the pre-human?
So that's pre-Māori and pre-European.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So between there and 1840, what happened for all that timber to be disappeared? What was the consequence of the sudden?
That was
What was it? Was it the river changing directional?
Combination of things, but it's including the arrival of European settlers, as well as the cumulative effect of the burn-offs that had happened prior to that as well, and not just burn-offs, sorry, clearing and other types of vegetation clearance.
So, yeah. The first wave of European settlers, signing of the treaty, there was 200 Europeans and 100,000 Maori. So that they can't have decimated that much forest in 20 years. So I'm just wondering what caused that's a very significant loss to forest.
It is these are estimates of, obviously we don't have the data at the time, but these are what the estimates were at the time. So it's really just to show the scale of loss over those 3 time periods.
Yeah, I know. I picking up Bruce's point, I think it's easy to misinterpret those graphs, the maps like that. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on.
I think Councillor Clarkson's got
has
a
a
comment.
Bruce, have you got another question or your hand's still up?
I'll pick it up with Ben later, but the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is what he needs to know about. The 1/3 that took 800 years, the 1/3 that took approximately 150 years, and the leaving behind of the 1/3 of New Zealand still in forest. Those are the figures. So Ben and I can talk about that offline.
Let us go. Thank you.
So enabling communities, learners, kaitaki, so getting that, fostering that active participation and capabilities. So asking people, how do we best do that? There's obviously a bunch of initiatives underway, but there are other ways of doing that as well. Getting those kaitiaki and community champions who have the knowledge, resources and relationships to act. So talking to them about this strategy, involving them in that development process, involving them in the priority setting around that as well. If you go to the next one, please. This is the monitoring, mapping and the data theme, ensuring that there's lots of data, lots of information out there, lots of technical detail. It's probably about accessibility for the community and making sure that it tells the story. And I think the discussion we've just had probably highlights some of that. Identify what's working, where to improve, and how to build trust and attract resourcing. So cultural and social monitoring approaches come into this as well, and sit alongside some of those more eco-centric scientific monitoring types. We move to the next one. Partnering with tangata whenua, so working in that genuine partnership, upholding the treaty principles, mana motahaki and biodiversity restoration. And I think we've had quite a lot of feedback through the accord process from iwi around utilisation of whenua, and making sure that that's not hindered by the approaches that might be taken in this, but that's actually enhanced and supported through this. So making sure that we use tikanga in our processes, and that those perspectives are rich and transform how we actually protect nature. So that holistic Te Ao Māori view and ensuring that that's part of how we engage on this as well. Next one, please. And this is about securing that long-term investment and resourcing. So ensuring stable long-term funding. There are funding initiatives around this, obviously within the region. But it's making sure that that's joined up and that the organisations are kind of all rowing in the same direction around that, and ensuring that that's enduring as well. There's recent opportunities around biodiversity credits and things like that have hit the news, and I'm sure there'll be other opportunities as we go further down the track with this as well. And that burden's not just on government, obviously. We're trying to get that funding from other sources too. I think that's it in terms of the themes. Julie, just want to touch on that slide because I think it's an important one.
We just put these last couple of slides in to look at the main sort of tenet of the strategy, which is about promoting landscape scale biodiversity restoration. So it comes back a little bit to what Councillor Clarkson was saying before. So there's been a tendency for discussion about biodiversity to be reduced to debates about particular sites, or particularly those sites that are significant. But managing biodiversity across the landscape isn't as simple as managing defined areas of vegetation in isolation from their context or their biophysical context. So we know that protecting key areas of habitat like significant natural areas is really important for preserving biodiversity, but simply managing SNAs in the landscape as isolated patches doesn't address the ongoing decline of ecosystems. So a spatial or ecological network approach, which looks at the connection of habitats across the landscape, so that's what you see in that diagram there, that's key to the long-term health of ecosystems. And it's a more strategic approach that's needed because it requires more collaboration and cooperation with a lot of different stakeholders, and we need good biodiversity information for that as well. So it's around building those connections and buffers and linkages around key biodiversity areas to strengthen the resilience of these areas to the stresses that they're going to experience, particularly through climate change. So the next slide is just about, what could this look like on the ground, if you like. It's not particularly new thinking. I mean, this is being done in other regions, particularly ones that come to mind are things like the large predator-free programs that are happening in Taranaki and Wellington and places like that. But it isn't, biodiversity management or restoration isn't just about predator control though. So it's about retaining what's there, restoring degraded ecosystems, and then reconstructing the links between them and the stepping stones. And then this slide also shows that the collaborative sort of funding models that need to be stitched together, if you like, to support that restoration in particular catchments or areas of the region.
Jen, you have a
I'm
question?
happy to wait till the end of the slides. I was hoping
Okay.
we're nearly there.
Oh, that's one more slide, which is basically the workshop questions. So that was the end of it.
So,
Jen, yeah.
thanks. Thank you both. I'll try and be really efficient. On those questions on that slide, I can go through it that way to be structured. What it means to me is that each type of biodiversity habitat that there was and can be, that we have an example of again, at the very least, ideally more. The themes, theme 1, I would possibly think about rewording just to move things around. It strikes me that ecosystem integrity is the critical first word, because if we have the word species there, I just think a lot of the history on this topic is focused on those cute and cuddly species, and that's where we've kind of gone wrong. And so enough conversations with Bruce about ecosystem integrity by now. And definitely around the implementation long term, I would be really keen to put more of our resourcing in the prioritizing the non-regulatory tools. I think we've just run out of time with regulatory tools and how long they take to make great impact there. Although, of course, when they come, they come. The theme number 2 about engaging local stewards and so forth. Am really keen to see landscape scale projects, and I think that one thing that really falls down in this area is when there's not professional coordinators of things. And I do wonder what kind of financing mechanisms we could use with the council. I think of the business improvement district targeted rate model that the city council uses to fund a professional coordinator for something like part of the city improvement, doing that in a biodiversity improvement district kind of way. And then the reason they need to be landscape scale is because that makes people who aren't usually engaged in this stuff feel like the project's going to be worthwhile. I think a lot of people don't engage because they think, oh, this is just a puny little thing, it'll fall over because nobody likes this lady, or, you know, all that stuff. And then the other point on that one is Bruce and I got a really good briefing the other day, as I'd emailed you last night, by Nikki Ismay on the collective impact work. I'd really like this to partner very closely with that, because that'll be really important in the implementation stage. And it gets to the heart of what we've discussed in the past as well about citizen science data and the ability to put that in. And I think that would speak to what comes up a lot in the JMAs as well about the start of cultural impact assessments and being able to put them somewhere and see them visually. On theme 3, I would broaden that to narratives rather than just data, because we know that people engage with that better. And then the last one was around theme 5. Could think about the governance aspect there, just like we've talked before, Tracy, with Whangamarino project. Really keen to get into that early on. And the last question was what other issues, mainly the financing solutions. And I just emailed Tracy a paper I came across in the conversation the other day, and it was around while wetlands are looked at as a cost.
Yeah, I saw that.
It'd be great if they were looked at as, well, not it'd be great. Somebody's making a really good argument around how they're an appreciating asset. And so if we talk more in spatial strategies about natural capital assets and so forth, then our economists can work that in. That was it. So.
Thank you.
Because theme 5 was sustaining the effort. I think that comes down to the financing, which comes down to the governance model. So that, so that the governors get together and find ways to find the finance.
Where do we draw the line with our estuaries and harbours and that sort of thing in this? Is there a place for that in here?
Yes, because I mean the focus will be on terrestrial biodiversity, but we can't ignore the freshwater and coastal. And the important parts for the strategy are going to be those transition areas, so the riparian areas along the reef and the headwaters of the rest of, you know, in the catchments, and then down the bottom end it would be around those estuaries and coastal wetlands, which is where a lot of the biodiversity is happening. So
Okay. So they are.
it's not going to be
yeah.
ignored.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ben.
Does that mean active support for mangroves?
Oh. Moving right along.
No comment.
No.
Bruce, online.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, support your comments, Warren, because the whole point here is that sometimes the word landscape doesn't quite get the message across because of the emphasis on the word land, and the whole system approach that's shown on those sorts of diagram, that image that Judy put up. Obviously, estuaries and the connection to the near coastal zone and the marine context are all part of the story and are all covered off in the New Zealand's biodiversity strategy, and so it's a total system approach, and I'm just wondering about what Ben meant when he made his brief comment. Then I didn't quite catch it. Is he able to repeat it?
Rather
Yeah,
didn't.
Yeah. My comment was, did this include endorsement of mangroves? And the reason I raised it is because a lot of people don't think about the land and the bush as much as they actually do the seabed and the interactions in the harbour where they are engaged as they drive past. So it's important it is included.
Yeah. Well, I won't get into the debate about mangroves, Ben, at this point, because that could take a while. But the main point is that where mangroves are more of a natural system, one is trying to look after them. But where you have in significant amounts of human interference in upper catchments and lower catchments, you end up in scenarios where the system gets a bit out of balance. And then there's often a case being made, which, you need to do something about them in certain contexts. But again, you're making the same point as Warren, is the whole system approach is important here. Land and sea, land, coastal and marine, all as part of a total system, because for the resilience of all Aotearoa New Zealand ecosystems, they were fully coupled systems. That's why they were resilient, more resilient previously than what they are now. And the simple example you can think of, for example, is the way seabirds provided nutrient to our inland forests, right up high, only even high altitudes on places like Mount Ruapehu, had seabirds coming and going and part of the system. And that whole linkage between and the coupling between land and water is part of the story.
Thanks for that, Bruce. Acknowledging Angus needs to get away. Is there anything else? That's true.
I was just going to say that top one's really just about it's almost that top theme there, protecting what matters and make the integrity of the system really. But just a couple of points I was going to make. That partnering with tangata whenua was quite important. We did have some robust discussions, as you know. It was pretty crucial, but ultimately that last one about long-term investment and resourcing, that's one of the fundamental things. If we don't get that right, we're seeing now likes of Mangatautere struggling, and it's unfortunately going to be a theme that reoccurs in the battle with healthcare and aged care and social welfare and sort of stuff. But there's not the only thing worse than not starting a pest control project is not maintaining it.
Yeah,
as you well know, but yeah, but fundamentally, I think you've got those themes. You're on the right track there. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Thanks, Stu. Anything else? No. Okay then. Thank you, guys. I hope you've got a bit of stuff extra out from today.
Very good.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And the last one for the day in front of us is the regional spatial framework.
So we've got Lizette/Miffy back in the hot seat. We're losing Noel. She's Noel. This, as we said, will be brought to council. We've got a paper on council agenda next week on the inventory. So, sorry, on the framework. So we've done the spatial inventory. We had a conversation about that. The next step is the framework, i.e. how we're going to